The manila folder slipped from my hands and hit the hardwood floor of my bedroom with a whisper that sounded like thunder in my ears. Photographs scattered across the polished surface, images of my daughters at school, at dance practice, walking home from the bus stop. Someone had been following my children. Someone had been documenting their routines, their movements, their lives, and that someone was my husband's mother. Hey there, beautiful souls. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story today. I am curious, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below. All right, let us dive into what happened to me. My knees buckled, and I grabbed the edge of my dresser to steady myself. The sharp corner dug into my palm, but the pain felt distant, muted by the roaring in my head. I had found the folder tucked behind the water heater in the basement while searching for the Christmas decorations, hidden inside an old toolbox that nobody had touched in months. My father-in-law must have stashed it there during their last visit. The investigation report was dated 3 weeks ago. Private detective, background check, financial analysis, medical records request. Every page of that 12-page document dissected my life with clinical precision, looking for cracks, for weaknesses, for anything that could paint me as an unfit mother. The final page made my blood turn to ice in my veins. A custody petition template, partially filled out, with my daughters' names already typed in the minor children section. I crouched down and gathered the photographs with trembling fingers. Sophia laughing with her friends outside the library. Maya spinning in her new red coat at the park. Both of them climbing into my car after I picked them up from choir practice. The photographer had captured dozens of moments, mundane and beautiful, each one transformed into evidence of something I could not yet understand. Someone had invested serious money into this surveillance operation. The house felt different now, contaminated by this discovery. I moved to the window and pulled back the curtain with enough force to make the rings scrape against the rod. The street outside looked normal. Mrs. Patterson watering her garden 3 houses down. The mail truck making its afternoon rounds. A blue sedan parked across the street that I had never noticed before. My reflection in the glass showed a woman I barely recognized, eyes wide and jaw clenched tight enough to ache. My phone buzzed in my back pocket, and I jumped, nearly dropping the folder I had clutched against my chest. The screen showed a text from my husband David. His mother's handwriting filled my mind instead, her looping script on the notes attached to several documents. Recommendations for family court attorneys. Names of child psychologists who specialized in custody evaluations. A highlighted section about sudden death clauses in parenting plans. They were preparing for me to die. Not just preparing, but positioning themselves to take my daughters the moment I was gone. The realization hit me like a physical blow, and I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. David's diabetes diagnosis had come 2 years ago, but he was managing it well. These documents were not about his death. Every form, every piece of evidence, every carefully constructed argument focused on one scenario: my absence. I spread the contents across my bedspread, organizing them with methodical precision that my shaking hands could barely manage. Bank statements with my spending patterns highlighted. Medical bills from my hysterectomy last year. A printed Facebook post where I had joked about needing wine after a particularly exhausting parent-teacher conference. Screenshots of my work schedule showing the late nights I spent at the hospital during my shifts as a surgical nurse. They had twisted every aspect of my life into a narrative of negligence and instability. The basement door creaked open downstairs. Footsteps moved across the kitchen floor with familiar heaviness. David was home early. My watch showed 3:15, 2 hours before his usual arrival time. The timing felt wrong, dangerous, like the universe was collapsing the breathing room I needed to think. I heard him set his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, the same ritual he performed every day, the small domestic sound now loaded with menace. "Nicole?" His voice carried up the stairs, casual and warm. "You home?" I stood and quickly gathered the documents, shoving them back into the folder with none of the care their original compiler had shown. The photographs refused to cooperate, slipping against each other, a few sliding to the floor again. My hands would not stop shaking enough to grip them properly. Sweat beaded on my forehead, despite the cool air conditioning flowing through the bedroom vent. "Yeah, I'm up here." The words came out steady, a small miracle. "Just changing. Be down in a minute." His footsteps started up the stairs, each creak of wood announcing his approach. I shoved the folder under my pillow and kicked the remaining photographs under the bed, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The bedroom door swung open just as I pulled off my shirt, creating a tableau of normalcy that felt like a stage play. David stood in the doorway watching me, his expression unreadable, briefcase still in his hand like he had rushed upstairs without setting it down first. I turned away and pulled a clean blouse from the dresser, fingers fumbling with the fabric. The mirror above the dresser reflected David's face behind me, his eyes tracking my movements with an intensity that made my skin prickle. He set the briefcase down slowly, the leather base meeting the hardwood floor without a sound. His tie was loosened, top button undone, but his shoulders held tension that made him look coiled, ready to spring. "You feeling okay?" He moved closer, and I could smell his cologne mixed with something else. Coffee, maybe, or the recycled air from his office building. "Fine, just tired." I buttoned the blouse with deliberate slowness, buying time, watching him in the mirror's reflection. He sat on the edge of the bed, right where the folder lay hidden beneath the pillow. The mattress compressed under his weight, and I imagined the documents bending, crinkling, announcing their presence through touch, alone. My breath caught in my throat. David's hand moved across the comforter, smoothing non-existent wrinkles, his palm sliding closer to the pillow with each stroke. I forced myself to finish with the buttons, to not react, to keep my face neutral in the mirror's unforgiving surface. The photo album corner peeked out from under the dust ruffle, just visible if someone looked at the right angle from where David sat. I moved to the closet, creating motion, drawing his attention away from the bed. Hangers scraped against the rod as I pretended to search for something, making noise, filling the dangerous silence that wanted to stretch between us. David stood again, and relief flooded through my chest so quickly I felt lightheaded. He walked to the window overlooking our backyard, where the kids' old swing set stood rusted and unused. His reflection in the glass showed his jaw working, grinding teeth together in that way he did when something bothered him. I watched him watching the yard, both of us performing normalcy while something rotten festered in the space between us. "My parents called today." He spoke to the window, not turning around. "They want to have dinner this weekend. All of us." The casualness of his tone felt calculated, a trap disguised as a simple invitation. I grabbed a pair of jeans from the closet shelf, needing something to do with my hands that were threatening to shake again. The denim felt rough against my palms, grounding me. "That's nice. When were you thinking?" "Saturday night. Mom's making pot roast." He turned from the window finally, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "The kids haven't seen them in a while." The kids, Marcus and Jasmine, 14 and 11 years old, my entire world compressed into two resilient souls who had no idea their grandparents were circling like vultures, documenting everything, building a case. The photograph of Marcus's teacher conference flashed in my mind, the one from the folder, annotated with concerns about his grades that I had never been told about directly. Someone had been collecting evidence, and now David's parents wanted a family dinner. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. David moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. He looked back at the bed, and for one terrible moment, I thought he saw the album corner protruding from beneath. His eyes scanned the room with an attention to detail I had never noticed before, taking inventory, searching for something out of place. "You sure you're okay? You seem off." "Just a headache. I'll take something for it." The lie came easily now, sliding off my tongue like I had been practicing. He left finally, his footsteps descending the stairs with the same measured pace they had climbed. I waited until I heard him in the kitchen, the refrigerator opening, the clink of a bottle against the counter. Only then did I pull the folder from under the pillow and retrieve the photos from beneath the bed. The pages had wrinkled slightly, evidence of my panic, my carelessness. I spread the documents across the closet floor, hidden behind the wall of winter coats that still smelled faintly of mothballs and cedar. My hands trembled as I photographed each page with my phone. The flash disabled, screen brightness turned down to a dim glow. The camera shutter made a soft click with each image. Letters from their attorney, medical records they had somehow obtained, screenshots of social media posts I barely remembered making. A photo of me at the grocery store looking exhausted, mascara smudged under one eye. Another of Marcus walking home from school alone, his backpack dragging. The documentation was methodical, professional. Someone had been following me for months. I heard the creak of the third stair from the bottom. David's footsteps, returning. I shoved the papers back into the folder, buried it beneath a stack of shoeboxes in the corner, and emerged from the closet just as his shadow appeared in the doorway. "I'm making coffee. Want some?" His voice carried that same careful neutrality. "No thanks." I moved to the dresser, pulling out clothes for tomorrow, keeping my movements casual even as my pulse hammered against my ribs. He lingered there, watching me fold and refold a sweater that didn't need folding. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope, and I was balanced in the middle, one wrong step away from falling. Finally, he retreated again, and I released the breath I had been holding. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside David in the darkness, listening to his breathing slow and deepen, wondering when he had become a stranger. The man I had married would have told me about his parents' concerns. This man kept folders hidden in guest rooms, made plans behind closed doors, smiled at me over breakfast while plotting my children's future without me in it. At 2 a.m, I slipped from the bed. The hardwood floor was cold against my bare feet as I moved down the hallway, past the kids' rooms where they slept unknowing. Marcus's door stood slightly ajar, and I could see his form buried beneath blankets, one arm hanging off the edge of the mattress. Jasmine had kicked off her covers entirely, sprawled across the bed in the fearless abandon of childhood. I descended the stairs in darkness, navigating by memory and the pale moonlight filtering through the front windows. David's study door was closed but unlocked. I turned the handle slowly, letting myself into the room that smelled of leather and old books and his cologne. His computer sat on the desk, the screen dark, but the power light glowing green. I pressed the power button, and the machine hummed to life, the monitor's glow harsh in the darkness. I tried his usual password, our anniversary date, access denied. I tried Jasmine's birthday, access denied. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed Marcus's birthday. The screen unlocked. I navigated to his email, my eyes scanning subject lines and sender names. There. Multiple messages from an address I didn't recognize. I clicked the first one, dated 3 weeks ago. The message was brief, clinical. Spoke with the investigator. He has photos from the incident at the school. Will forward separately. My stomach dropped. The incident at the school. When I had been late picking up Marcus because a meeting had run over, and he had waited an extra 45 minutes. I had apologized profusely, explained the situation, thought it was resolved. Someone had been watching, documenting, adding it to their evidence file. I clicked through more emails. His mother's name appeared repeatedly, Patricia. Each message contained updates, suggestions, legal terminology I didn't fully understand. Custodial arrangements, temporary guardianship, best interests of the children. The words blurred together as my vision swam with tears I refused to let fall. A sound from upstairs, footsteps crossing the bedroom floor above my head. I closed the browser, shut down the computer, and slipped from the study just as I heard the bathroom door close. Back in the living room, I curled into the corner of the couch, pulling an Afghan over myself, forcing my breathing to slow. When David found me there at dawn, I pretended to be asleep. He stood over me for a long moment before moving to the kitchen. I heard the coffee maker start its familiar gurgle and hiss. Heard him moving through his morning routine with the same precision he applied to everything else. Measuring, planning, preparing. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, counting the hairline cracks in the plaster, thinking about lawyers and evidence and how to protect my children from people who believed they were acting out of love. The coffee aroma drifted into the living room, bitter and sharp. I pushed the Afghan aside and stood, my joints protesting after a night on the couch. Through the doorway, I watched David's back as he poured cream into his mug, 3 precise circles clockwise. 20 years of mornings, and he still followed the same ritual. He turned. Our eyes met across the kitchen threshold. "You're up early." His voice carried no inflection, just observation. I crossed to the counter, reached for a mug without responding. My hand trembled as I poured, black liquid sloshing near the rim. David's gaze tracked the movement, and I saw calculation flicker across his features. Another mental note, another piece of documentation. The front door burst open. Marcus stumbled in, his shirt torn at the shoulder, blood streaming from his nose. My mug shattered against the tile floor. I reached him in 3 strides, hands hovering over his face, his arms cataloging injuries. His eye was already swelling, purple blooming across his cheekbone like a bruise on fruit. He tried to speak, but only blood bubbled from his split lip. "Bathroom. Now." I guided him down the hall, one arm around his waist. Behind me, David's footsteps followed, measured and calm despite the chaos. In the fluorescent bathroom light, the damage looked worse. I turned on the cold water, soaked a washcloth, pressed it against his nose. Marcus winced but didn't pull away. His breathing came in ragged gasps through his mouth. "Who did this?" David's reflection appeared in the mirror behind us. Marcus's good eye darted to me, then away. Fear rippled across his battered face. Not fear of whoever had hit him. Fear of answering his father. I tilted Marcus's head back, pinched the bridge of his nose through the cloth. "We need ice. Kitchen. Top shelf of the freezer." David didn't move. He stood in the doorway, blocking any exit, his presence filling the small space like humidity before a storm. I asked him a question. "And I'm asking you to get ice." I kept my voice level, focused on cleaning the blood from Marcus's face. My son's skin felt hot beneath my fingertips, fever warm with adrenaline and fear. The silence stretched. Then David's footsteps retreated down the hall. Marcus grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Mom, I found something." His words came out thick, distorted by his swollen mouth. "In grandmother's car. Papers. About us. About you." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. "What papers?" He fumbled in his jacket pocket, pulled out crumpled sheets folded into quarters. Blood had soaked through one corner, making the ink run in pink rivulets. I smoothed them open against the sink counter, my hands moving automatically, while my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. Medical records. Mine. From my oncologist. From the hospital where I'd had surgery 2 years ago. Private documents that should have been locked away. HIPAA protected, inaccessible to anyone without my explicit consent. Yet here they were, photocopied and highlighted, certain passages marked with aggressive yellow streaks. 5-year survival rates. Recurrence statistics. Risk factors. She left them in the front seat. Marcus's voice cracked. "I went to get my backpack from her car after she drove me home yesterday. She and grandfather were arguing in the house, so I looked. Mom, there's more. Letters from a lawyer. Something about changing custody if..." David's footsteps echoed in the hallway, returning. I shoved the papers into my cardigan pocket, spun Marcus toward the tub. "Get in. We're cleaning you up properly." He climbed over the porcelain edge, still wearing his shoes, his jeans. I turned on the shower, cold water blasting from the nozzle, drowning out any possibility of conversation. The spray soaked his clothes, ran red down the drain as it washed away the blood. David appeared with a bag of frozen peas, his expression unreadable. He set it on the sink edge and leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Watching. Always watching. I adjusted the water temperature, tested it with my hand until it ran lukewarm. Marcus stood shivering under the spray, his ruined clothes plastered to his thin frame. He'd lost weight recently. When had that happened? What else had I missed while trying to appear healthy, capable, cancer-free? "Patricia called this morning." David's words cut through the sound of running water. "She's concerned about Marcus's behavior at school. His grades are slipping." I peeled off Marcus's soaked shirt, examined the bruises blooming across his ribs. 4 distinct marks, knuckle-shaped and angry. Professional punches, aimed with intent. "Someone beat him, David. His grades can wait." She also mentioned you missed your last follow-up appointment, the one in October. My hand stilled on Marcus's shoulder. He looked up at me, water streaming down his battered face, eyes wide with understanding. They'd been tracking my medical appointments, monitoring my compliance, building their case not just on my parenting, but on my mortality. I turned off the shower with a sharp twist. Water dripped from Marcus's hair, his eyelashes pooling around his sneakers in the tub. "Get out." My voice came out harder than intended. David straightened. "Nicole?" I said, "Get out." For a moment, he didn't move. Then he picked up the frozen peas and left, pulling the door closed with a soft click that felt more threatening than a slam. I wrapped Marcus in a towel, rubbing his arms briskly to generate warmth. His teeth chattered despite the bathroom's humid air. The bruises on his ribs stood out darker now, purple-black against his brown skin. I pressed gently around each one, checking for broken bones, for internal damage I couldn't see. He flinched, but didn't cry out. "Who did this?" I kept my voice low, meant only for him. Marcus shook his head. Water droplets flew from his hair, spattering the mirror. I dried his face with deliberate care, dabbing around the swelling near his left eye. The silence between us felt thick, protective. Whatever he wasn't saying, he had his reasons. I wouldn't press. Not yet. Not with David somewhere outside this door, listening for ammunition. Clean clothes materialized in my hands. Sweatpants, a hoodie I'd bought him last month. He dressed himself slowly, wincing when he raised his arms. I combed his hair, parted it on the left like he preferred. Normal mom things. The kind of things Patricia would document as evidence of my capability or lack thereof. The floorboards creaked in the hallway, David's footsteps retreating toward the kitchen. I opened the bathroom door and guided Marcus to his bedroom, my hand on his shoulder blade. His room smelled like dirty laundry and the lemon air freshener I'd sprayed yesterday. Posters of basketball players covered one wall. His desk overflowed with unfinished homework, candy wrappers, a calculator with a cracked screen. He climbed into bed without argument. I pulled the covers up to his chin, tucked them around his shoulders. "Mom?" His voice came out scratchy. "Are they going to take me?" My chest tightened. I sat on the edge of his mattress, felt it dip under my weight. "No one's taking you anywhere." But the words tasted like lies even as I spoke them. I'd found the documents 3 days ago, hidden in David's office drawer beneath tax returns and insurance policies. Petition for emergency custody. Legal memorandums citing precedent cases. A folder labeled Nicole Medical History, containing printouts of my oncology records, somehow obtained without my authorization. They'd been planning this for months, maybe years. I stood and crossed to Marcus's window, looked out at the backyard where David's parents lived in the converted garage apartment. Lights blazed in every window despite the afternoon hour. Patricia moved past one window, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling their lawyer. Probably reporting that Nicole had lost her temper, had ordered David out of the bathroom, was becoming unstable. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. A woman who looked older than 54, thinner than she should be, with shadows under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I'd beaten the cancer, but my body still bore its scars. The port scar on my chest. The hair that had grown back different, coarser. The way my clothes hung loose now, as if I were disappearing from inside them. Behind me, Marcus's breathing had already deepened into sleep. Exhaustion or concussion, I couldn't tell which. I should wake him every few hours, check his pupils, watch for signs of brain injury. I left his door cracked open and walked down the hallway. The house felt different now, charged with threat. Every family photo on the wall seemed to mock me. There, Marcus at 3, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on Patricia's lap. There, our wedding photo, David's parents flanking us like sentries. There, last Christmas, all of us crowded around the tree, Patricia's hand possessive on Marcus's shoulder. They'd been positioning themselves in his life all along. I'd thought they were being helpful grandparents, involved, loving. I'd been wrong. David sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, typing with aggressive precision. He didn't look up when I entered. The frozen peas sat melting in a puddle on the counter, forgotten. I opened the junk drawer, pulled out the folder I'd hidden there yesterday beneath takeout menus and rubber bands. The copied documents crinkled as I dropped them on the table in front of him. His fingers froze on the keyboard. "When were you going to tell me?" I asked. He stared at the papers. His jaw worked, but no sound emerged. I watched him calculate, weighing different responses, different strategies. This was who he'd become, or maybe who he'd always been, and I'd been too in love, too trusting, too sick to notice. "Nicole, those are private." "Private?" The word came out sharp enough to cut. "These are custody papers with my son's name on them." David closed his laptop with careful precision. His movements were controlled, deliberate, like a man handling explosives. "He's my son, too." "Then act like it." I leaned across the table, felt my pulse hammering in my temples. "Tell me why your parents have a lawyer on retainer. Tell me why there's a medical file with my records that you shouldn't have access to." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. For a second, something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Then it vanished, replaced by the careful neutrality he'd perfected over the past year. "You're not well enough to care for him alone," he said quietly. "We're trying to protect him, to protect you." The kitchen seemed to shrink around us. Outside, I heard a car door slam. Footsteps on the driveway. The doorbell rang, shrill and demanding. The doorbell's second chime pierced through the kitchen tension. David's eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back to me. His hand moved to his phone on the counter, fingers twitching like he wanted to grab it, but didn't dare turn his back. I moved first. My feet carried me around the table, past him, into the hall. Each step felt like walking through water, my body still heavy from yesterday's treatment. The nausea that had plagued me all morning surged again, but I swallowed it down. Through the frosted glass panel, I could make out two figures. One tall and angular, one shorter, broader. Both waiting with the patience of people who expected to be let in. My hand wrapped around the deadbolt. The metal was cold against my palm, and I focused on that sensation. Something real, something solid. I twisted the lock and pulled. Barbara stood on my porch in her pearls and pressed slacks, looking like she'd stepped out of a country club luncheon. Behind her, Gerald adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his expression carefully neutral. Between them sat two leather briefcases, the expensive kind lawyers carried. "Nicole." Barbara's voice dripped with concern that didn't reach her eyes. "We've been so worried." She moved forward, and I stepped into the doorframe, blocking her path. The porch light cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting the tight lines around her mouth. She stopped, her smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. "This isn't a good time," I said. Gerald cleared his throat, a wet, rattling sound. "We received a call from David. He's concerned about your state of mind." The words hung in the humid air between us. Behind me, I felt David's presence in the hallway, heard the soft scuff of his shoes against hardwood. He was positioning himself, I realized, creating witnesses to whatever scene was about to unfold. Barbara's hand reached out, touched my forearm with fingers that felt like ice despite the summer heat. "Sweetheart, we just want to help. Let us come in. We can talk about what's best for everyone." I pulled my arm back. The movement made my head swim, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision. I gripped the doorframe tighter, fighting to stay upright, to keep my face blank. "I found the papers," I said. The mask slipped, just for a moment, but I saw it. Barbara's jaw tightened, her nostrils flared. Gerald's hand moved to her elbow, a gesture that looked supportive but felt like restraint. They'd practiced this, I realized. Rehearsed their responses, their concerned expressions, their careful words. "What papers, dear?" Barbara's voice remained smooth, but her eyes had gone hard. Behind me, David spoke. "Nicole's been confused lately. The medication? Don't." I turned my head, just enough to see him in my peripheral vision. "Don't you dare!" He stood in the hallway, backlit by the kitchen light, his face lost in shadow. But I could see his hands, clasped in front of him in that prayer-like gesture he used when he wanted to appear reasonable. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. I turned back to his parents. "I know about the custody motion. I know about the medical evaluations you've been collecting." Gerald's briefcase clicked open. The sound was loud in the suddenly still air. He pulled out a manila folder, held it against his chest like a shield. "We have documentation," he said. "Evidence of concerning behavior, missed medication doses, erratic decision-making." "Lies. Is it?" Barbara stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and cloying. "You've been taking Cameron on those exhausting outings when you can barely stand. Exposing him to your mood swings. Making him fear for your health every single day." My knees buckled. Just slightly, just enough. I caught myself against the doorframe, my knuckles white with the force of my grip. The porch tilted, then righted itself. Through the rushing in my ears, I heard Barbara's sharp intake of breath. Saw her exchange a glance with Gerald. They were documenting this too. Every tremor, every sign of weakness, building their case in real time. "Where's my son?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. "At school," David said from behind me. "Where he's supposed to be." I forced myself to straighten, to meet Barbara's gaze directly. Her pupils were dilated, excited. She thought she was winning. "Get off my porch." "Nicole, this is my house. My name is on the deed. Get off my porch." Gerald closed his briefcase with a decisive snap. "We'll be filing a motion for emergency custody," he said. His voice carried no emotion, just cold certainty. "Your medical records speak for themselves. No judge will allow a child to remain in an unstable environment." They turned together, synchronized, moving down the porch steps with unhurried confidence. Barbara paused at the bottom, looked back over her shoulder. "We're not the enemy, Nicole. We're thinking of Cameron's welfare." Their car doors closed in stereo. The engine purred to life, expensive and quiet. I watched their taillights disappear around the corner before I let myself slide down the doorframe to sit on the threshold, my legs finally giving out completely. David's shadow fell across me. "You're making this worse," he said. I didn't look up. Couldn't. The concrete was cool beneath my palms, grounding. "How long have you been planning this?" Silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant sound of a lawnmower, someone's dog barking. Normal neighborhood sounds for a day that had shattered into pieces. "Since the diagnosis came back positive," he finally said. "Since we knew it was terminal." The words hit like a physical blow. My diaphragm seized, forgetting how to expand. I pressed one hand against the doorframe, fingers digging into the wood grain until splinters threatened to pierce skin. Terminal. He'd said it so casually, as if discussing weekend plans. I pushed myself upright, legs trembling with the effort. My vision tunneled, darkness creeping in from the edges. But I forced oxygen into my lungs through sheer will. One breath. Two. The dizziness receded enough for me to turn and face him. David stood 3 feet away, hands shoved deep in his pockets, jaw tight, not meeting my eyes. Guilt written in the slope of his shoulders, the way his weight shifted from foot to foot like a child caught stealing. "I'm not dying." My voice came out rough, scraped raw. "The biopsy was inconclusive. Inconclusive means they don't know. Dr. Patterson called me yesterday." David finally looked up, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. "The second round of tests, they found—" "No." I stepped back into the house, putting distance between us. Patterson wouldn't discuss my medical information with you. That's illegal. The muscle in his jaw twitched. We're married, Nicole. That doesn't give you access to my private medical records. My hand found the edge of the hall table, gripped it. The wood was solid, real, anchoring me while everything else spun out of control. Unless I signed a release form, which I didn't. David's silence confirmed what I already knew. They'd gotten to Patterson somehow. Money, probably. His parents had enough of it to make ethical boundaries blur. Barbara collected people the way others collected art. Strategic acquisitions that served her purposes. I moved deeper into the house, every step deliberate. My legs felt disconnected from my body, operating on autopilot while my brain struggled to process the magnitude of betrayal. In the living room, Cameron's backpack lay slumped by the couch, homework papers spilling out across the carpet, a math worksheet covered in his careful handwriting. He dotted his I's with small circles, had since second grade. The photo wall stretched above the fireplace, 12 years of Cameron's life in chronological order. First day of kindergarten, gap-toothed and eager. Little League uniform, bat over his shoulder. Last year's school picture, where he'd finally grown into his ears. My fingers traced the frame edges without conscious thought. They can't have him. The words emerged quiet but absolute. I don't care what papers they file or which judge they bribe. He's my son. David's footsteps creaked across the hardwood behind me. You're not thinking clearly. The cancer... There is no cancer. I spun to face him, and something in my movement made him stop short. You want there to be cancer. You need there to be, because otherwise you're just a coward who's stealing his own son. His face flushed dark red, veins standing out in his neck. I'm protecting him. From what? A mother who loves him? My hands clenched into fists at my sides, nails cutting crescents into my palms. The pain felt good, sharp and clean and real. Or are you protecting him from having a black mother when your parents can offer him a better life? The words hung in the air between us, finally spoken after 12 years of careful avoidance. Barbara's comments about Cameron's hair, his music choices, his friends. Gerald's suggestions about appropriate colleges, neighborhoods, social circles. The 1,000 small cuts that added up to one clear message. I wasn't good enough. Would never be good enough. David's expression shifted, something cracking in the facade. That's not, they don't... He stopped, started again. This isn't about race. Everything is about race when your mother clutches her purse tighter around my relatives and loosens it for yours. I crossed the room to the window, looked out at the empty street. Curtains twitched in the house across the way. Mrs. Chen, probably, watching the drama unfold. By tomorrow, the whole neighborhood would know. But you're right. This is about survival. Cameron's and mine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hands shaking. A text from an unknown number. Documentation secured. Call when safe? M. Melissa. My attorney. The one person in this nightmare I could actually trust. David stepped closer, peering over my shoulder. Who's that? I locked the screen, slid the phone back into my pocket. None of your business. Everything involving Cameron is my business. His voice hardened, the brief crack in his armor sealing over. I'm his father. Then act like it. I pushed past him, shoulder connecting solidly with his chest. He stumbled back, surprise registering on his face. I'd never pushed him before, never needed to. Get out of my house. It's my house, too. Not for long. I yanked open the front door, held it wide. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of cut grass and distant rain. I want you gone before Cameron gets home. David didn't move. We stood frozen, locked in a silent battle of wills. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away seconds, each one stretching impossibly long. Finally, he grabbed his jacket from the coat rack, movements sharp with suppressed anger. This isn't over. It really isn't. I kept my voice level, though my pulse hammered in my throat. Tell your parents I'll see them in court. He paused in the doorway, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same scent I'd once found comforting. Now it made my stomach turn. You can't win this, Nicole. You know that. I slammed the door in his face. The courthouse steps stretched before me like a gauntlet, each limestone slab worn smooth by decades of desperate footsteps. I gripped the wrought iron railing, knuckles whitening as I pulled myself upward. My knee protested, the old basketball injury flaring in the November chill. Behind me, Melissa's heels clicked a steady rhythm, her leather briefcase swinging with each determined stride. The revolving door spat us into a marble lobby teeming with bodies. Attorneys in expensive suits clustered near the elevators, their voices echoing off vaulted ceilings. I scanned faces, searching for the ones I dreaded seeing. My chest constricted when I spotted them. David's parents stood near the security checkpoint, flanked by two attorneys I didn't recognize. Gerald Whitmore, my father-in-law, wore his trademark charcoal suit, silver cufflinks catching the fluorescent light. His wife, Patricia, clutched a designer handbag against her cream-colored blazer, her posture rigid as steel rebar. Between them stood David, his expression carefully neutral. Patricia's eyes found mine across the crowded space. Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile, if smiles could draw blood. Melissa's hand pressed against my lower back, guiding me forward. Don't engage. Eyes forward. We moved through security, my keys and phone clattering into the plastic bin. The metal detector beeped as I passed through. The guard waved me on without interest, already focused on the next person in line. The elevator ride to the fourth floor lasted an eternity compressed into 45 seconds. Melissa reviewed papers, lips moving soundlessly as she read. I watched the floor numbers illuminate and die. 3, then 4. The doors slid open. Judge Amanda Rivera's courtroom occupied the corner suite, double doors propped wide to accommodate the morning docket. We entered through the gallery, settling into the hard wooden benches on the left side. Across the aisle, Gerald and Patricia took their seats, their legal team arranging documents with practiced efficiency. Cameron wasn't here. Thank God for small mercies. Melissa had argued successfully to keep him out of the proceedings, at least for today's hearing. He was at school, oblivious, still believing his grandmother just wanted to spend more time with him. The bailiff emerged from a side door, his voice cutting through the murmured conversations. All rise for the Honorable Judge Rivera. Wood creaked as bodies shifted upward. Judge Rivera entered, a compact woman in her 60s with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She settled into her chair, arranging her robe with quick, efficient movements. Be seated. Her voice carried authority earned through years on the bench. Papers rustled as she reviewed the case file. In the matter of Whitmore versus Jackson, custody petition, counsel's approach. Melissa rose smoothly, her movements confident. Gerald's lead attorney, a silver-haired man whose tailored suit probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, joined her at the bench. They spoke in hushed tones with the judge, words inaudible from where I sat. I forced myself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique my therapist had taught me after Sarah's diagnosis. After the doctors had explained that stage 4 meant borrowed time, that we should start preparing for the inevitable. The attorneys returned to their respective tables. Judge Rivera adjusted her glasses, studying documents spread before her. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore, please stand. Gerald and Patricia rose in unison, practiced performers on a familiar stage. Patricia's hand found Gerald's, their fingers interlacing with rehearsed timing. You're petitioning for emergency custody of your grandson, Cameron Jackson, age 12, on grounds that his mother is currently unfit due to terminal illness. Judge Rivera's tone remained neutral, clinical. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Gerald's voice resonated with the confidence of a man accustomed to being heard and obeyed. And Mrs. Jackson, you're opposing this petition. The judge's gaze shifted to me. Stand, please. My legs obeyed, though they felt disconnected from my body. Melissa stood beside me, her presence a solid anchor in churning waters. Yes, Your Honor. The court has reviewed the medical documentation provided by both parties. Judge Rivera tapped a manila folder. Your prognosis is indeed terminal, Mrs. Jackson. How do you respond to the petitioner's concerns about your ability to care for your son? The words stuck in my throat like broken glass. Melissa's hand touched my elbow, a gentle prompt. I'm still here, I managed. Still capable, still his mother. Patricia shifted in her seat, a small sound of disapproval escaping her lips. Judge Rivera's eyes flicked toward her, sharp as scalpels, and Patricia froze. The petitioners have also submitted evidence suggesting you've made decisions contrary to Cameron's best interests. More papers rustling. Including exposing him to inappropriate situations and denying him access to his extended family. My pulse hammered against my temples. Melissa stepped forward slightly, her voice clear and measured. Your Honor, if I may address those allegations. The courtroom doors burst open with a crack like thunder. Every head swiveled. A woman strode down the center aisle, her sneakers squeaking against polished floors. She wore scrubs, pediatric patterns with cartoon characters, and carried a thick file folder. Dr. Chen? Judge Rivera's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. This is highly irregular. I apologize, Your Honor. The doctor reached the front of the courtroom, slightly breathless. I'm Cameron Jackson, pediatrician. I received the court summons only this morning due to a clerical error at my office. I have critical information regarding this case. Gerald's attorney surged to his feet. Objection! This witness wasn't disclosed because she wasn't notified. Melissa interjected smoothly. The court requested Cameron's medical records. Dr. Chen has every right to contextualize that information. Judge Rivera studied Dr. Chen for a long moment, then gestured to the witness stand. Very well. Bailiff, swear her in. Dr. Chen raised her right hand, repeated the oath in a steady voice, then settled into the witness chair. She opened her file, extracted several documents, and handed copies to the bailiff for distribution. Dr. Chen, how long have you been Cameron Jackson physician? Judge Rivera asked. Since birth, 12 years. She adjusted her position, facing the judge directly. I've also been treating Mrs. Jackson throughout her illness. And what is your assessment of Mrs. Jackson's current ability to parent? She's dying. Dr. Chen's bluntness cut through the courtroom's tension. Patricia gasped softly. But death isn't instantaneous. Mrs. Jackson currently maintains full cognitive function, physical mobility, and parental capability. Her decline will be gradual. She has months, possibly longer with treatment. Gerald's attorney stood again. But she will decline. The child will be traumatized, forced to watch his mother deteriorate. Children are traumatized by losing their parents. Dr. Chen interrupted, her voice sharp. But they're devastated by losing them twice. Once when they're taken away. Once when death occurs. Cameron needs this time with his mother. Needs to process, to grieve, to say goodbye properly. The words hit like physical blows. I gripped the table edge, wood grain rough beneath my palms. Judge Rivera leaned forward. And the allegations about Mrs. Jackson's judgment? Exposing Cameron to inappropriate situations? Dr. Chen's expression hardened. You mean allowing him to visit his dying mother's hospital appointments? Letting him understand what's happening instead of lying? That's not poor judgment, Your Honor. That's preparing him for reality. Patricia's composure finally cracked. She shot to her feet, voice trembling with barely contained fury. She's poisoning him against us, telling him we're trying to steal him, because you are. The words exploded from my chest before I could stop them. You filed custody papers before I'm even gone. The gavel cracked against wood, sharp and final. Order! Judge Rivera's command silenced the erupting chaos. Mrs. Whitmore, sit down. Mrs. Jackson, contain yourself or I'll hold you in contempt. I sank back onto the bench, heart racing. Melissa's hand found my shoulder, squeezed once, warning and support simultaneously. Judge Rivera removed her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. The courtroom held its collective breath. Here's what's going to happen. The judge's fingers drummed once against the mahogany desk, each tap echoing through the silent courtroom like a countdown. Her eyes moved from Patricia's flushed face to my trembling hands, then down to the stack of documents before her. Mrs. Jackson retains full custody. The petition is denied. The air rushed from my lungs. My vision blurred at the edges, spots dancing across the polished wood floor. Melissa's arm wrapped around my shoulders, holding me upright as my knees buckled. Behind me, Patricia's sharp intake of breath cut through the room like breaking glass. Her heels clicked rapidly against the floor, once, twice, then stopped. When I turned, her face had transformed into something pale and carved from stone, all pretense of grandmotherly concern stripped away. Furthermore, Judge Rivera continued, flipping through the pages with deliberate slowness, I'm ordering a 6-month restraining order. No contact with Cameron or Mrs. Jackson except through supervised channels arranged by Mrs. Ramirez, the court-appointed social worker. Any violations will result in immediate contempt charges. Patricia's attorney gathered his papers with sharp, angry movements. His briefcase snapped shut with a sound like a trap springing empty. They moved toward the exit, Patricia's spine rigid, her handbag clutched against her chest like armor. She paused at the courtroom doors, turned back. Her eyes met mine across the distance, and for one breathless moment, something almost human flickered there. Grief, perhaps, or the ghost of the woman who'd once baked cookies for Cameron's birthday. Then her jaw tightened, lips pressing into a thin white line. This isn't over, she said, voice barely above a whisper, but carrying nevertheless. The doors swung shut behind her. The sound reverberated through the empty space, final as a period at the end of a sentence. Outside, the afternoon sun hit my face like a benediction. I leaned against the courthouse steps, rough concrete warmed through my dress, and let my body shake with the aftermath of adrenaline. Melissa stood beside me, phone already out, texting rapid updates to my sister Denise, who'd stayed home with Cameron. My phone buzzed. Cameron's message lit up the screen. Mom? Just that single word, heavy with everything unsaid. My fingers trembled as I typed back. Coming home, we won. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, can we have pizza tonight? Laughter burst from my chest, surprising and genuine. The normalcy of it, the beautiful, ordinary request from a 12-year-old boy who'd just been spared upheaval, felt like oxygen after drowning. "Extra cheese," I typed. The drive home passed in a blur of afternoon traffic and golden light filtering through oak trees. Melissa drove while I stared out the window, watching suburban houses stream past, each containing their own dramas and disasters. My reflection ghosted across the glass, hollow cheeks, dark circles beneath my eyes, but also something new. Strength, maybe, or just the relief of survival. Cameron exploded through the front door before I'd reached the porch steps. His arms wrapped around my waist, face buried against my shoulder. His body trembled, and I felt wetness seeping through my dress where his tears fell. My hands found his hair, smoothed it back the way I'd done since he was a toddler. "I thought," his voice cracked, "I thought they'd take me." "Never." I tilted his chin up, forced him to meet my eyes. "You hear me?" "Never." Inside, Denise had already started dinner. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the kitchen, normal and grounding. She caught my eye over Cameron's head, relief flooding her features. Her hands moved through familiar motions, stirring, tasting, adjusting seasoning, while I held my son in the doorway. That night, after pizza and animated retellings of the court proceedings, I found Cameron in his room. He sat cross-legged on his bed, surrounded by photos he'd pulled from various drawers and boxes. Pictures of his father, of family vacations, of birthday parties. In the center, a photo of Patricia and Gerald from before, back when they'd smiled genuinely, when love hadn't curdled into desperation and control. "You can still remember them as they were," I said, sitting beside him. His fingers traced the photo's edge. "Will they try again?" "Maybe." Honesty felt important now, after everything. "But we'll be ready." He nodded slowly, set the photos aside, and curled against me. His breathing gradually steadied, muscles relaxing into sleep. I stayed there, back aching against the headboard, watching shadows lengthen across the wall as evening deepened into night. Through the window, stars emerged one by one, pinpricks of light against infinite darkness. Tomorrow I had another hospital appointment, more tests, more grim-faced doctors with their careful euphemisms. But tonight, my son slept safe in his own bed, in his own home, with his mother watching over him. I'd protected what mattered most. Everything else, the fear, the uncertainty, the ticking clock of my diagnosis, could wait until morning. Block 1010. The cherry blossoms had started blooming when I pulled into the community center parking lot. 6 months had passed since the courthouse, since that final confrontation with Patricia and Gerald. My hands gripped the steering wheel, feeling the familiar texture beneath my palms, worn smooth from countless drives to hospitals, schools, therapy appointments. Cameron bounded out of the passenger side before I'd fully stopped, his backpack slapping against his shoulders as he jogged toward the entrance. He'd shot up 2 inches, grown into his features. The haunted look had faded from his eyes, replaced by something lighter. He turned back, waving impatiently for me to hurry. Inside, the gymnasium smelled of floor wax and the faint sweetness of the juice boxes lined up on folding tables. Other parents clustered near the bleachers, phones ready to capture their children's performances. I found a spot near the middle, setting down my purse and the cushion I now carried everywhere. Sitting too long still hurt, though the pain had changed. Different medications, different side effects, different battles. The youth basketball team took the court for warm-ups. Cameron dribbled past defenders, his movements fluid and confident. A year ago, he wouldn't have tried out. Wouldn't have wanted the attention, the scrutiny. But here he was, laughing as another boy from his team, Marcus something, I'd met the parents once, stole the ball and launched a wild shot that bounced off the rim. My phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, saw the name of my attorney, and let it go to voicemail. Nothing urgent, just finalizing the last details of the trust, the guardianship documents that named my sister Denise as primary, with my colleague Rachel as backup. Everything documented, notarized, locked down tighter than Fort Knox. The whistle blew. Players took their positions. Cameron crouched at center court, eyes focused, body coiled and ready. The referee tossed the ball up. Bodies surged forward in controlled chaos. I watched him sprint down court, calling for the pass. Another parent beside me, a woman I didn't know, cheered wildly as her son scored. The scoreboard clicked over, numbers changing, time counting down. Cameron's team huddled during a timeout, their coach gesturing and speaking rapidly while 12-year-olds nodded with exaggerated seriousness. After the game, win or lose, I'd already forgotten which, we drove to the diner on 5th Street. The same vinyl booths, same laminated menus sticky with syrup and years of handling. Cameron ordered a burger with extra pickles, grinning at the waitress who knew our usual order by heart. "Mom, can Tyler come over this weekend?" He swirled his straw through chocolate milkshake, creating small whirlpools. "The one from science class?" "Yeah, we're building a volcano for the fair." I nodded, filing away the mental note. Another name, another friend. The isolation had lifted gradually, like fog burning off in morning sun. He'd stopped hoarding his social life, stopped protecting me from the evidence of his happiness. My salad arrived. Doctor's orders, portion control, nothing fried. And I picked at it while Cameron demolished his burger. Through the window, traffic moved in predictable patterns. Red lights, green lights, people heading home from work or heading out for evening plans. The waitress refilled my water without asking, the ice cubes clinking against glass. She'd worked here for 20 years, knew every regular, remembered every order. Stability in the small things. "How do you feel?" Cameron's question cut through my wandering thoughts. "Today? Pretty good." Not a lie, not quite truth. The latest scans had shown improvement, not remission, but stabilization. A plateau instead of a cliff. My oncologist had used words like promising and encouraging, which meant more time, maybe years instead of months. Cameron nodded, satisfied with this answer. He'd learned to read my face, to distinguish between the lies I told for his protection and the honesty I owed him. The balance shifted daily. We drove home as twilight painted the sky in shades of amber and violet. Our street looked different in this light. Softer, gentler. The house that Patricia and Gerald had threatened to claim stood solid and familiar. My sister's car already parked in the driveway. She'd moved closer, just 20 minutes away now, bridging the gap I'd let grow too wide during my marriage. Inside, Denise had started dinner. The aroma of garlic and basil filled the kitchen, pasta water bubbling on the stove. She looked up from chopping tomatoes, knife pausing mid-slice. "Good game?" "We won by 12, Cameron announced, already raiding the refrigerator. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, hung my coat on its designated hook. Simple actions, mundane routines. The architecture of a life rebuilt from the foundation up. Later, after Cameron had retreated to his room and Denise had gone home, I stood in the backyard. The grass needed mowing. Weeds had claimed the flower beds I'd neglected. But the old oak tree still stood, branches reaching toward stars that were just beginning to appear. My phone held dozens of unread messages, support group members, Friends from church. The lawyer confirming everything was in order. I scrolled through them slowly, responding to each with care. Community, I'd learned, wasn't built in crisis. It was maintained in the quiet spaces between disasters. Tomorrow, I had another scan. Next week, Cameron had parent-teacher conferences. The following month, a vacation. Nothing elaborate, just 3 days at the coast with Denise and her family. Plans stretching forward, roots growing deeper. I inhaled the cool evening air, feeling it fill my lungs, still breathing, still fighting, still here. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.